off, like I said, talking a little bit about ethics, because I think it's important for us to kind of understand what the expectations are when we're up here speaking, and when we're speaking to audiences, audiences of one, audiences of two or three, or even larger audiences. And so I want to talk a little bit about ethics and what that means in the speaking world. So to start, pull up my notes, ethics. So to start, as I probably mentioned, I've designed my lectures to be short and concise, and to model essentially what we should be doing in all of our speeches. And so you'll see that a lot of my lectures I start with an attention step, a quote. And you'll see on the outline template, all of our outline templates, the first step of our introduction is the attention step, where we try to get our audience's attention. So this is where we start. We start with the attention step. So Albert Schweitzer, one of the greatest humanitarians and Nobel Peace Prize winner, said this. He said, "The first step in the evolution of ethics is a sense of solidarity with other human beings." So the first step in the evolution of ethics is a sense of solidarity with other human beings. And I'm a firm believer that really at its core, ethics is connected to our solidarity and care for each other. And so if we do care about each other and care about our fellow human beings, we want to be ethical, right? In the words of Quintilian, right, we want to be good people morally. And so even if you've not taken an ethics course, we've all at least heard this word and have some basic understanding of what it is to be ethical. But, nowadays can't really make those assumptions, as we do have some people, and again, politicians. I'm going to rag on politicians. I'll let you decide which political party you want to be affiliated with. I'm going to rag on all of them just the same. But we have some politicians out there that don't do a very good job of really articulating what they're doing and why it's in our benefit as people. And so, again, I think ethics is something we're continually questioning. And so it's important to know when you are speaking, again, to one other person, to a small group, or to a large audience, your audience is asking, right, what's in it for me? Why is this important for me? Do I benefit from this? Our audiences, they're asking those questions. And so again, I'm not an expert in ethics. I don't teach ethics. I'm not an ethics professor, but I teach public speaking. So that's really where I want to kind of bring in ethics. I want to talk about, again, my area of expertise, public speaking, communication skill development, and really what is ethical and what are the ethical considerations we should take note of when we are speaking. So let's start with ethics. So I'm going to share what is ethical public speaking, and kind of establish a foundation, right, of ethics. But then I'm going to more specifically talk about ethical lapses that we see when we're speaking, specifically what I see from students in these classes. And how do we avoid those ethical lapses? How do we prevent an ethical violation from happening when we are speaking? And so that's really what I'm going to talk about, and then we can take a little break and then transition to special occasion speaking. So to get started, ethics. What is ethics? If you're taking notes, at its bare minimum, ethics is a branch of philosophy that deals with the issues of right or wrong, specifically right or wrong in human behavior. So ethical issues arise when we are speaking and when our audience is asking, right? Is what they're sharing with me moral or immoral, fair or unfair, just or unjust, honest or dishonest, true or false, right? Is it true or is it a lie? Is it real news or fake news, right? Those questions emerge from our audience. And so we as speakers need to do our part to help ensure that our audience can trust us. And that all kind of comes down to the ethics of what we are sharing with our audience. So when we are speaking publicly, there are some guidelines for ethical behavior that we should adhere to. And we should make sure, primarily, that our goals for delivering the speech are ethically sound. The way we do that is by ensuring we have the audience's best interest in mind. And so we may have prepared a quality, informative speech to teach our audience something, or a persuasive speech to persuade them to go do something or to agree with us about something, but ultimately we need to ensure we are conveying how this is beneficial for our audience. And we need to ensure we are being honest and truthful so that we avoid any ethical lapses. So again, this applies to one-on-one, small group, or even large audience speaking. As an audience member, you also have an ethical obligation, so you should be courteous, attentive during the speech, avoid prejudging the speaker, and really do your best to be open to those ideas. But again, the speaker must be able to articulate what is it that they're sharing that is for the audience's benefit. And are they able to clarify or justify or provide support for their points? And that's where this term plagiarism comes in. So the number one ethical lapse that I see with public speaking is plagiarism. This is one of the most serious ethical lapses a public speaker can commit, but it is also preventable. So I'm going to share with you some types of plagiarism so that you're kind of aware of the different types, specifically what I see the most of in this class, and then how you can avoid plagiarism when it comes to essentially plagiarizing in your speeches. So first, plagiarism as a concept is when you're presenting another person's language or ideas as your own. That is what we must avoid. So if we are collecting information and data and sources, we must make sure we include who wrote it, when they wrote it, those types of things. We must provide those sources. If we do not, and we just are sharing language and ideas without providing those sources, we are plagiarizing. And it's interesting because the concept of plagiarism in public speaking has changed over time. There was a point in time in history where it was okay to, this person said this, okay, I'm going to borrow it, put it in here. Oh, this person said that, okay, I'm going to borrow it and put it in here. And not have to reference, not share where you got it, and just pass it off as your own. And there are some pretty famous speakers who have done this. And what I discovered when I was doing kind of my civil rights rhetoric study at the University of Alabama was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did this. And when he did it, it wasn't considered wrong, it wasn't considered immoral, but he did borrow words and language from people and pass it off as his own because he didn't cite where he got it from. But nowadays, as we are speaking, our audiences are being critical, right? And they're analyzing, and they are wanting to know who wrote it, who said it, are the ideas original, or are they someone else's? So again, it's changed over time, and what was first considered acceptable is no longer considered acceptable and is considered plagiarism. So there's three types of plagiarism I want you to be familiar with. The first is going to be global plagiarism. This is going to be where you take an entire speech from a single source and pass it off as your own. There's a lot of websites out there, have a lot of speeches. You can very easily copy and paste and say it's your own. That is plagiarism. So that's global plagiarism. So we're going to avoid that, right? And in this class, it's a little harder to do that because I require you to use this speech outline template, which is not a speech outline template provided anywhere else. So, I mean, there may be speech outline templates other instructors provide or textbooks publishers create and provide, but this is my own masterpiece that I have improved through use and reuse. So that's global. The second is going to be patchwork plagiarism. So this is going to be where you patch together like a quilt by copying verbatim 2 or 3 sources and putting that together and passing one speech off as your own when it really is the exact words of 2 or 3 other people. So we want to make sure we avoid the patchwork plagiarism. And then the last one is incremental plagiarism, and this is what I see the most of because usually this is done accidentally. And it's important to know that accidental plagiarism is still plagiarism and a violation of the school's policies. And so really what this is failing to give credit to the parts that you borrow from other sources. So that's incremental plagiarism, where you may be including the data, the research that you have found, but you aren't including who wrote it, who provided that information. So we need to make sure we do that. So the great news is there is an easy solution to avoiding plagiarism. and that is going to be citing your sources. So this may look familiar. So for public speaking, we cite our sources using the American Psychological Association's manual, APA. So we don't use MLA or Chicago. Those are other types. So MLA is probably the most common, right? Because that's what English uses. In fact, that was part of kind of the split, the divide, when all the public speaking teachers walked out of the English Teachers Conference back in the, was it 1960s or 70s. One of the sources of frustration was a lot of social sciences use the APA guidebook, the APA style. No one, and I should be careful where I say this, no one in the real world uses MLA. No one. Because all scientists use APA. That is the standard. So that kind of frustrated me when I went throughout my education, even into college, learning MLA, and then I get out into producing presentations for work. My first job out of college was doing nonprofit administration, right? And I had to prepare presentations with data and cite my sources and say, look, this is where I found this research. They were expecting it in APA format. They were expecting a list of references, not in my presentation, but handed to them, and those being in APA format. I was like, what do you mean? I learned MLA throughout high school and college. So anyway, so that is one of the probably differences between like an English course and public speaking is we use APA. What that means is, and here let me actually kind of provide some better examples. What that means is when you are delivering a speech, you need to have essentially three types of citations. You're going to have a verbal citation where you say, according to this author, right? According to this website, right? You're verbally saying the source. And then you say in whatever their quote is, whether you're directly quoting or paraphrasing, and we'll dive deeper into this when we get into doing research. But I just want to kind of preface and kind of give you a preview here that you should verbally cite. You also need to have in-text citations, right? You need to have in APA format, right? Usually date and page number. Or if you've not already mentioned the authors, it's usually the author's date and page number. So you need to have those in-text citations in your speech outline. And all of our speech outlines, you'll see at the bottom, have a references section. That's also different. We don't call it works cited. We call it references. And we put in APA format in alphabetical order any of the sources that we used. So when I'm reading your speech outlines, I will see according to, I will see a quote or a paraphrase with an in-text citation, and I will be able to connect that to one of your references. So those are essentially the three ways that we are ensuring we're not plagiarizing, is verbal citations, written citations, and ensuring our references include all of those sources. So we'll dive deeper into citations and writing citations, but I wanted to kind of give this to you as a starting point, specifically because next week we're going to do an assignment, the Civic Engagement News Practice Speech, where you'll go out and do some research and find a news story of someone or an organization doing some good work in the community, being civically responsible, civically engaged, and you're going to share that news story with us, and that's going to be your opportunity to practice incorporating these verbal citations, right? According to NPR.org, right? According to the Washington Post. So you're going to practice using that. I'll give you a cue, or I'll give you kind of, because I don't want any surprises, I will be listening for, in all of your speeches, specifically the phrase, according to. Now, when you're doing speeches other places, there's other ways you can phrase a verbal citation, but in this class, like for the informative speech, there's either like 3 or 5 citations that are required, or sources that are required. I'll be listening for you to say, according to, at least those 3 or 5 times, so that I know you are incorporating a source. So I wanted to share that because that is how we prevent plagiarism. Ethical public speaking is at its core about what is right or wrong and ensuring that we are doing right by our audience. We are ensuring we don't commit these ethical lapses. Specifically, incremental plagiarism is the most common that I see in this course. Just a failure to cite where you pull that information. So anytime you pull in facts, anytime you pull in ideas, if it's not your own, you've got to tell us where you got it from. And then avoiding plagiarism by citing our sources. And that ultimately is how we ensure we are ethical public speakers. So the question can be asked, if someone does not have the audience's best interest at heart, are they being ethical? And the answer from public speaker educators would be no, they're not. If they are speaking to their audience for selfish gain, for their own benefit, that is not ethical public speaking. So again, we can look to politicians and government officials who are good examples of this and not good examples of this, right? There are many of those in kind of the public arena that really are doing it, doing that work. They wanted to get elected to that position because they want to help society improve. But there are people out there who have ulterior motives and selfish interests. And so it's important that we also apply this criteria, not just when we're speaking, but when we are listening to people speaking, right? So are they citing their sources? Are they citing where they're pulling this information, or are they just spouting off at random whatever they want? And if they aren't providing sources, we should demand, where did you get that information? Where are your facts? And we, again, if we go back to what we learned last week, we as citizens of this country should be participating in our democracy and asking that of our government leaders. Because again, the first step in the evolution of ethics is a sense of solidarity with other human beings. So again, as we're speaking in this class, my hope is you are going out and finding some information and teaching us something that will be of benefit to us. Or when we get to persuasive speaking, persuading us to go out and do something or to agree with you on something that would be in our benefit or for society's benefit. So that is ethical, kind of my short lecture on ethical public speaking. So anybody heard of Albert Schweitzer before? So I read this story actually from Public Radio International, PRI. It was a story titled Historic Albert Schweitzer Hospital Adapts to New Africa. Albert Schweitzer was a theologian, he was a missionary, he was a musician, a philosopher, but he was a medical doctor. And he became a doctor and moved to Gabon, which was Africa, or what was known at the time as French Equatorial Africa. And I think I have the article here. Yeah, there's the article. And so he moved to Africa because he said, in his words, he said his goal was to quote, where is it here? I have his quote here. His quote was to atone for the evils white men had committed in Africa. And so his hope was really to set an example for other people, and he really came in and helped alleviate a lot of suffering as a doctor. From 1913 to 1965, he ran this hospital and really brought in a lot of medical care to that community that wasn't there previously. And so for that, he won the 1952 Nobel Peace Prize. So a lot of people haven't heard of him, don't know him, but it is an example of someone who really did embody care for his fellow man. So, and really felt a sense of solidarity with other human beings. So I thought that quote and his example are good examples for us as we move forward learning about ethical public speaking. So that is occasion speeches unique. So many special occasion speeches involve some sort of public gathering. Or it could be a family gathering. So ceremonies such as weddings, funerals, dedications, even a lot of office and work-related speeches fall into this category. What makes special occasion speeches memorable are the words that are shared. So the words that are shared in a special occasion speech make it special, make these occasions special. So the primary purpose of a special occasion speech, again, because this can apply to a variety of contexts, like graduations, funerals, weddings, right? Just sharing positive words as a supervisor with the team that you supervise. These are all special occasion speeches. And so the primary purpose of a special occasion speech is for you as the speaker to fulfill the needs of the occasion, which sounds very broad and could be somewhat confusing because you as the speaker have to identify what are the needs of this occasion. That's different, right? For an informative speech, we'll learn the goal of an informative speech is to inform, is to teach. The goal of a persuasive speech is to persuade. The goal of a special occasion speech is to fulfill the needs of the occasion. That is what you must determine. So there might be information that you include in a special occasion speech, so it could be somewhat informative. It may also be persuasive. You might use some good logos, ethos, and pathos in your speech to be persuasive. But the focus, the aim is to identify the needs of the occasion, of the situation. So what does that mean? That means you as the speaker must ask, what does the audience need to do? What do they need to get from my speech? So do they need to celebrate? Right? That would be a wedding toast, right? That could also be a eulogy, is to celebrate a person. Graduation speeches are celebratory. So it could be to celebrate. It could be to entertain. It could be to inspire. It could be to give thanks, right, on behalf of a group or for a group. Or it could be to remember someone or an organization or an institution. So that calling to memory the history of something. All of these are possible special occasion speeches. So it's up for you to determine what is needed. What is needed for that occasion. So the types of special occasion speeches really kind of fall into the categories of what we need, right? So the first of these types, I'm going to share just 4 types with you. Again, there's more out there, but I'm just going to keep it simple and kind of share 4 general types of special occasion speeches. And we're going to watch examples of them. So the first is going to be the most common special occasion speech, which is a speech of introduction. So this speech is one you're giving to an audience. You're introducing and building enthusiasm for the speaker. You're generating interest in the speaker's topic. And you're establishing a welcoming climate for the speaker. So the goal when you're introducing someone is not for you for people being excited about you or your topic necessarily, right? So whatever the speaker is speaking on, generate interest in that topic, generate excitement and enthusiasm for that speaker. It needs to be brief, and it needs to be adapted to the individual person. I have myself written speeches of introduction and just kind of in general, and then when I show up to the event and figure out who I'm introducing, I can just plug in, right? I interview them for about 3 or 5 minutes and then plug in specific facts about them. But a lot of the information that I may be sharing, the quotes I might be sharing, right, I've already kind of pre-planned that. So there's some prep you can do even if you don't know who you may be introducing. So the goal really primarily is to gain or build this sense of anticipation for the person who is about to speak. And there's a couple types of speeches of introduction. The first you've already done. You've done a self-introduction. You've introduced yourself to the class. The other would be a colleague or peer introduction. We're introducing someone else, someone you work for, someone you work with. And that's what we're going to practice this week in the classmate introduction speech. But I'm going to share with you 2 videos. The first is called The Courtyard, and it's a formal self-introduction speech. So we did informal ones here. This is a more formal self-introduction speech, which means there's a PowerPoint presentation that they use for their visual aid. The language use and even the body language is more formal. So it may come across not very personal, but it's also important to know this was video recorded. This was filmed for the purpose of sharing an example. So it may not come across as natural. But I want us to listen to how she uses narrative and story to share about herself. Because I think that's a valuable skill, and that's a technique that we're going to learn more about when we get to informative speaking, is how do we use narrative and storytelling to share information. And so let's watch this example. And as we watch it again, make note of what resonates with you, what stands out to you, because those are the things we want to try to model as we go to do this and practice doing this next class. So let's listen to this example called The Courtyard.
When I look at this photo, I think of lemons, peaches, and guava. I think of lush green trees and bright red roses. I think of good food and joyous celebrations. birthdays, weddings, holidays. This courtyard is where my grandmother lived and taught me about my Mexican heritage. Even though I was born in the US and have lived here all my life, the courtyard is very meaningful to me. It has helped me to understand the importance of family and the cultures that have shaped my life. The courtyard symbolizes the importance of family in my life. It's located in a small town in Mexico where both my parents were born and raised. I first visited the courtyard when I was 5 years old, and I will never forget the meals my grandmother's love. Over the years, she taught me to dance to mariachi music in the courtyard, about the roses and the other flowers, and she told me the story of when my father asked for my mother's hand in marriage in that very courtyard. In addition to family, the courtyard symbolizes the different cultures that have shaped my life. Whenever we went to Mexico, my parents lit up because it felt like home to them, but not to me. Sometimes I felt out of place, especially because I was born in the US and my Spanish is not perfect. That led me to wonder who I am and how I should identify. With friends here, I sometimes feel too Mexican, but in Mexico, I definitely feel American. I don't think I ever got over these feelings, but I've learned to accept them. So, even though now I'm a student here at Wisconsin, when I look at this photo, I can practically smell the roses and hear the joy of family celebrations. And I miss my grandmother. She died 2 years ago, but I can still see her face and hear her voice. And I remember all the things she taught me on the tiled floor by the fountain. Now, I proudly call the US home, but when I look at this photo, I will always think of my grandmother and my home away from home. Thank you.
So here, through this story of the courtyard, we learned so much about her, right? We learned about her family, and that family was important. It was an important value for her. We learned about her identity, her family culture and how she identifies, and even some of the kind of challenges, right, that she's been going through and kind of thinking through in regards to her culture and heritage. We know she's a student, right? So we've learned about her, but we learned about her through this story of the courtyard. So again, it's a good technique, narrative, and storytelling, and we'll revisit this when we get to informative speaking. Let's also look at an example of a classmate introduction. So this is a formal classmate introduction, so not precisely what I'm expecting on Thursday. Thursday can be a little more informal. But we do want to kind of listen to the speech that she uses, or the language that she uses. She's going to use a repetitive phrase to kind of guide us through her main points. So our previous speaker used, the main points of family and identity, right? Those were the main points that she shared with us through this story. Here we hear a story of a classmate, of this student's classmate. And I want to make sure to point out a couple things. One is, I've had some students with the stories that are shared, they're like, oh, did the person give permission for them to share these stories? And the answer is yes, because again, they were filming this for our benefit. And so, but to that point, when you on Thursday are given the prompts, right, and are interviewing each other and sharing a little bit about each other, you do want to kind of write out a draft and clarify with whoever you're speaking about that what you're sharing about them is appropriate, kind of get their consent. And so that's what essentially Thursday will spend some time doing that. So Thursday will be very interactive. You'll have time to interview each other and essentially write out just a short 1 minute at most, maybe 2 minutes introduction of another person. And so this gives you kind of a good example to follow. So listen to the words that she uses, kind of how she structures it. And again, we'll dive deeper into some of the techniques she uses. But let's listen to this video. It's called Fearless.
Fear, monsters, the unknown. We all know what it's like to be scared. Our classmate Bella certainly does. Ever since she can remember, she's had night terrors. Dreams so vivid and so real that she'll wake herself up in a panic. Once, she even fell out of bed and rammed her chin into a dresser. That's Bella at night. But during the day, she's completely different. She's fearless. She's fearless in athletics, she's fearless in travel, and she's fearless in seizing new opportunities. Bella is fearless when it comes to athletics. In high school, she played on her varsity soccer team for 3 years. That's impressive considering her team won state championships her junior and senior year. On the soccer field, Bella is a midfielder, which means she uses a lot of endurance. Outside the soccer field, she uses her endurance to run marathons. Athletics give Bella bravery. Bravery that she uses in other parts of her life. Other parts, like travel. When she was 7, she traveled to Italy for a family reunion and loved every second of it. Last year, she went to New York and the Dominican Republic, where she participated in Alternative Spring Break. This year, she's going on Alternative Spring Break again, this time in New Orleans. Wherever she travels, Bella looks to expand her horizons. She also looks to expand her horizons by seizing whatever opportunities, large or small, come her way. For example, Bella grew up in Minnesota and often went to the state fair where she tried unusual foods, like deep fried butter. In her junior year of high school, she tried being a vegetarian, but that failed miserably. Here, at Wisconsin, she wants to be a business major, even though she has no idea exactly what she wants to do with her life. Soon, she plans on joining a sorority and starting a flag football team. Whatever it may be, Bella will be open-minded and seize what life has to offer. An amazing athlete, a seasoned traveler, an open-minded and adventurous person. That's Bella. She's fearless. Except when it comes to the occasional night terror.
So here we have her using a story to start about fear, right? And the attention step, I thought, was very, very well done, right? She doesn't say, hello, my name is, this is what I'm talking about. Her first words were fear, monsters, the unknown. I mean, that captures our attention, right? And that's a good example of an attention step. Something to get your audience's attention. And so again, we'll dive deeper into that. But that is juxtaposed to being fearless, right? So she shares with us this example of fear, but then says, well, that's at night, but during the day, flips it, night and day, Bella is fearless. Fearless. And she uses that, right? Fearless in athletics, fearless in travel, fearless, being open-minded and trying new things. And so those are the main points, right? Those are the 3 main points shared with us through this story about having fear and being fearless. And there's a lot of examples out there of using repetitive phrasing, and so this is part of what we'll dive into when we more into informative speaking. Dr. King did it brilliantly as well. He had phrases that are known for it. I mean, I have a dream. It's called the I have a dream speech because he repeats that phrase multiple times. He had another one, it's called just I've been to the mountaintop speech, which was the last speech he did before he was assassinated. He uses the same thing. He uses a repetitive phrasing regarding that. So there are some other examples, and we'll look at those when we get more into informative speaking. But I wanted to kind of introduce you to it because these are strategies you can incorporate into a classmate introduction speech. So I just want to kind of touch on some of the other speeches that you might be giving in a professional career. You may or may not have already done some of these. So the next is going to be a speech of presentation. This is going to be when you are giving someone an award or a gift. And again, this is something that's part of our everyday lives, speeches of presentation. This could be, again, so places where I've worked, we've had Employee of the Month or Employee of the Week, right? So they get some kind of award, and the manager usually has a few words to say about why they're receiving that award. One place where I worked, we had this rubber duck, and someone decided that would be a trophy that could be passed around amongst the staff every week, so we had the Duck of the Week award. It's silly, but it was a way to recognize someone who had helped someone else out that week, had been a good colleague, a good coworker. And so the staff passed that around amongst themselves and would usually stand up and say, I'm giving this to so-and-so because they did this for me this week, right? So these, even simple as that, these are speeches of presentation. The key thing I want you to take away in regards to a speech of presentation is that you should be discussing the recipient's achievements in some meaningful way, right? what did they achieve in order to earn this award or earn this gift. For the staff that I supervise, I may not do this in a group setting, right? I may just do this one-on-one. I mean, it's still a speech of presentation. For the people that I supervise, directors of various offices around our campus, and being a director of an office at a university is not an easy job, right? There's a lot of challenges that come up, and our job is to navigate and figure out those challenges on behalf of our students, so our students have a good educational experience. And so I've prepared little gifts for everyone that I supervise, and over the next couple weeks when I'm meeting with them in kind of our one-on-one supervision meetings, I'm going to give them that gift and say some words. Say, this is, I'm recognizing you and giving you this gift because I appreciate, insert, whatever I appreciate, them for, right? They took charge of that orientation event and really did navigate that well when the food didn't arrive on time, right? So I'm specifically mentioning what they did to receive this specific award. I will not share in class, but I will post on Brightspace a link to this video. Has anyone heard of Toastmasters International? Okay, great organization. When you're not in college and you're in the working world, there are few professional development opportunities that aren't. There's always professional development opportunities that are provided through employers. But beyond that, there really aren't a whole lot out there. But Toastmasters International is an internationally recognized organization. A lot of businesses even now have chapters of Toastmasters. We just built one at National Louis University, so faculty and staff attend once a month, attend a Toastmasters club. And it's kind of, just to share in brief, there's two tracks. There's like a communication track and there's a leadership track. And the goal of Toastmasters is to give you experiences and training on either of those kind of two tracks. They call them pathways now. And this example is from a Toastmasters meeting. So, at some point when you're done with this class and you're like, yeah, I really want to further develop my public speaking skills or further develop my leadership skills, I would encourage you to look into a Toastmasters International club. There's a ton of them. Like I said, even businesses now have created them. So, and there's some that meet in person, some that meet online. But this person is doing a speech of presentation. So when you do like the public speaking track, it's kind of like a class. You get instructions on how to do this, examples on how to do this, and then at some point you'll get up and do it in front of the club. So you will do a speech of introduction, there's a speech of presentation, and so that's professional development, because these people aren't in a college class, but they're developing this skill. This person is doing presenting an award, so doing a speech of presentation, and it's a good example of sharing why a person is receiving that award. So I'll post this on Brightspace for you to watch. It's a 4-minute video, but for you to kind of watch on your own if you want to see a good example of a speech of presentation. Not a perfect example, but a good example kind of includes everything that needs to be included in a speech of presentation. The next kind of speech is a speech of acceptance. So this is going to be if you are receiving an award or you are receiving a gift. And I say award or gift because a lot of people, again, when they think of public speaking, they're thinking of environments like this, right? Like someone receiving an award on a stage, and that's not the majority of our experience, right? I've received more awards just one-on-one than I have in front of a big audience. And so I think, again, where it's applicable, and again, I don't like anything that I can't use in my everyday life, knowing how to appropriately receive recognition is important and is part of being a professional. And so I won't show this clip. I'll post it on Brightspace for you to watch. It's let's see, this one's about 4 minutes as well. Has anyone heard of Malala Yousafzai? She was, I kind of summarized her story, she was shot in the face by the Taliban when she was attempting to go to school, because at that time the Taliban had forbid women, girls, from going to school. She since has done a lot of work really advocating for women's rights, even children's rights around the world, and she's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And this is her Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. Very well done. She does a great job incorporating humor and kind of makes fun of herself, which we'll learn is a good strategy, kind of that self-deprecating humor. There's a variety of people that do it well, and so later we'll watch some examples of that. But she does a really good job, I think, of using humor. But really, what the key takeaway I want you to take away from the importance and what should be included with a speech of acceptance is, if it is a competition, it is good etiquette and it is customary and expected that you praise the other competitors. And I share this because, unfortunately, this has been lost in our society. We have, and again, I'm going to rag on politicians because they're good examples, but we have politicians nowadays that don't even, congratulate or extend a hand to the other people that they're competing with. And so, and again, that's poor etiquette, and they probably didn't take a public speaking class because again, it's appropriate, it's customary, it's etiquette, it's respectful to praise the other competitors if you were, in a competition. And so she does that. She actually recognizes someone who was also receiving a Nobel Peace Prize award alongside her, who was from a completely different culture than her, and a culture that typically clashes with her culture, but yet they were on the stage together, and she recognizes this other person. So I'll share this link for you to kind of watch on your own. Again, it's just 4 minutes, but I really want to kind of get to the last of the 4 speech types that I want to share about here, and that's going to be the commemorative speech. So this speech, some people call it a tribute speech. That's how some instructors phrase it. But this type of speech pays tribute to a person or to a group of people or an institution. So it pays tribute. So the purpose of a commemorative speech really is, the main purpose is to inspire the audience. To inspire the audience, to really get the audience to feel and express positive feelings, arouse sentiments for specifically or usually a person. Although this could also be an occasion, like a graduation. And so again, there's a lot of pathos, a lot of invoking of emotions in a commemorative speech. And that's why some of the most memorable speeches throughout history are commemorative speeches. Because people find creative and eloquent ways to express to us ways to commemorate and pay tribute to people or to organizations or to institutions. And we're going to cover later some of the stylistic devices that are used, but I want to kind of pause there as far as the lecture goes, and I'm going to share an example of this on Thursday, and I want the example that I share, I'm going to kind of talk through it on Thursday. What I want to do, and that's the example that I'll provide, is kind of to round this out, is to share. Like, these are common everyday, and that's why I share these 4 specifically, because they are some of the most common presentations or speaking situations that you might do. So speech of introduction, speech of acceptance, speech of presentation, and a commemorative speech to pay tribute or to celebrate someone. And so, so to round out our time tonight, I would like us to take a look at this speech outline template and share with you a few things. So you will see that in the speech outline template, there's 4, I call them stages. There's the preparation stage, there's the introduction stage, there's the body stage, and then there's the conclusion. Oh, there's 5, and then references. I guess references aren't really a stage, but you just have to have references. So preparation, introduction, body, conclusion. And so we're going to dive deeper into each of these. But where I want to draw your attention now, kind of in preparation for Thursday, is to the introduction stage of our speech outline. So again, these stages don't change. You're going to have them in the informative speeches. You have them in the persuasive speech because, again, if we think back to what we learned last week, Cicero, his 5 canons, he said, invention is important, right? How we select our speech topics is important. So he's saying we need to pay attention to our topics, what the purpose is of that topic. We need to spend time thinking through the purpose of our speech, right? and then and also how we're going to organize it. So there's some preparation that we must do before we even start doing research on our speech. And so that's why I didn't used to have this as part of the outline, but students I noticed were struggling to start somewhere. And so this gives us a starting point. These are some decisions we have to make, some choices we have to make before we can move forward and start doing research. So, and I just shared with you kind of these 4 speech types. There are some others out there that I haven't included on here. But my hope is that you're kind of get familiar with this outline template. Specifically, before Thursday, give some thought to an attention step. So we heard a few of them, right? We heard the courtyard story. That was a story that was shared. We heard the story about Bella being fearless, right? Actually, how she has some fear, right, with her night terrors, right, was the attention step. So we've heard some examples. You had some, right, when you gave your self-introductions. And so give some thought to, do a little preliminary research. See, are there some quotes out there that you can add to your toolbox? Maybe a story out there that you can, kind of have in a little nice, concise way. And just kind of pull those aside. Save those in a document or something. Because what I want you to start doing is building out your toolbox as we move forward. Because on Thursday, it'll be an impromptu speech. We're going to spend time interviewing each other. And you're going to write in class using kind of this outline structure from this template. You're going to craft. You're going to have an introduction, right? You'll have a body, you'll have a conclusion. So we'll talk about those other parts, but give some thought to maybe a quote you could use. A story, you might get that from your partner, whoever you're paired up with for the speeches of introduction, but keep in mind that we aren't just saying, hello, my name is, or hello, they're from, this is their name, this is where they're from, this is what they enjoy doing. We're actually going a little more in depth. And we're sharing. These are the interview questions. The first question is, what is a societal or community problem that you're passionate about? And then the second is, in what ways are you interested in helping solve that problem? So that is the conversation that you're having. And from that conversation, you might receive a story from the partner you're paired up with that you can use for an attention step, like the example of Bella's night terrors. But if you don't, it's good to come prepared with something. And so that's where, search for some general quotes that you could use to start your speech. Kind of like I do when I start lecture, right? I start with a quote. And so any quote related to societal problems, community problems, solving those problems, giving back to the community, any kind of quotes in those areas would be relevant. But I would say before Thursday, see if you can kind of identify, if anything, identify a source where you can go to find some good attention steps. Because on Thursday, we'll want to reduce the research time so that the bulk of that time is spent in conversation. And so that when you go to kind of write out what you're going to share with us in class, you've already got maybe an idea of an attention step. And that's really kind of the goal. So not a true homework assignment, but just see if there's you can identify some places where you can pull maybe a quote to give us as an attention step. So that is our plan for Thursday. So I will pick up with sharing with you a commemorative speech. Specifically, I'm holding off because there's some strategies in here that I want us to consider when we're applying it to the classmate introduction speech. So that's why I'm going to wait to share it just before we start that activity, because there's some things, and the example is from President Obama's speech before he was even president, before anybody knew who he was. I mean, people in Illinois knew who he was, but no one around the country knew who he was. And he used some very skillful strategies in his speech that we're going to use and try to model in this course. So that's where we'll start. We'll start with commemorative speech example, and then we'll transition to the classmate introduction, where you're practicing gathering some data from each other and then structuring that in just a very short, no more than 2-minute introduction of a classmate. So I'll wait to do the pairings until everyone is here on Thursday, because we have a couple people who aren't here. But essentially I'll just at random pair you up, and then we'll have time for you to meet with each other and talk through those questions. Any questions for me? So come Thursday ready. It's a little bit more interactive. It's going to be less talking on my side and more talking on your side. So come ready to be more interactive and prepared to practice introducing a classmate. And with that, I will say thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Yep.